Sergeant Kane pushed open the familiar front door of his modest two-story home, the same door he had painted blue 3 summers ago, with his daughter's tiny handprints still visible on the lower panel. The house was quieter than he remembered. Too quiet. He dropped his military duffel bag by the entrance, the heavy thud echoing through what should have been a home filled with laughter, and the patter of small feet running to greet him. 18 months earlier, Kane had been a different man. He was a decorated Army sergeant with 12 years of service, known among his unit for his unwavering dedication to both his country and his family. When the deployment orders came for the southern border crisis, the choice was impossible. Serve his nation or stay with his daughter. The military doesn't offer alternatives to men like Cassius. You serve when called, no matter the personal cost. The night before his departure, he had tucked Seraphina into her princess-themed bedroom, reading her favorite story about a brave knight who always came home to his castle. His daughter's eyes had sparkled with trust as she made him promise to return safely. "I'll always come back to you, little star," he had whispered, kissing her forehead. Those words would echo in his mind for the next 18 months as he patrolled hostile territory, dreaming of the day he would walk through that blue door again. Cassius was the kind of father who built tree houses from scratch, who taught his daughter to ride a bike by running alongside her for hours until his lungs burned. His fellow soldiers often found him staring at photos of Seraphina during quiet moments, a man whose entire world revolved around a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and an infectious laugh. Seraphina Kane had been the light of their small suburban neighborhood. At 7 years old, she was known for her curiosity, her love of ballet dancing in the living room, and her habit of greeting everyone with enthusiastic waves from their front porch. She had her father's determined spirit and her late mother's gentle heart, a combination that made her both fearless and kind. Before Cassius left, Seraphina would spend hours drawing pictures of soldiers and princesses, always ending her artistic sessions by running to show him her creations. She had a special way of tilting her head when she was thinking, a gesture that never failed to melt his heart. Her laughter could fill their entire house, bouncing off the walls like music. She was a child who lived in perpetual motion, climbing, jumping, dancing, never still for more than a few minutes at a time. The morning her father left for deployment, she had stood on her tiptoes to hug him goodbye, her small arms barely reaching around his neck. "Count the days, Daddy," she had said with the wisdom that sometimes emerges from children. "I'll count them too, and when our numbers match, you'll be home." It was a promise that would sustain them both through the long separation ahead. The memories that sustained Cassius through 18 months of military service were simple but profound. Saturday mornings when Seraphina would wake him up by jumping on his bed, insisting they make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The way she would sprint across their backyard, arms outstretched like an airplane, her joy so pure it seemed to make the very air shimmer around her. He remembered teaching her to climb the old oak tree behind their house, watching as she fearlessly scrambled up the branches, always eager to go higher. "Look, Daddy, I'm taller than the house," she would call down, her face glowing with accomplishment. Those were the moments when being a single father felt less like a burden and more like the greatest privilege in the world. Their evening walks to the local park were sacred rituals. Seraphina would run ahead, then circle back to grab his hand, chattering about everything and nothing, her school friends, the stray cat she wanted to adopt, her dreams of becoming an astronaut, ballerina, veterinarian. Her imagination was boundless, her spirit uncontainable. She moved through the world with the confidence of a child who had never been given a reason to doubt her worth. The orders came on a Tuesday morning in March. Border tensions had escalated, and experienced sergeants like Cassius were needed immediately. The deployment was classified as emergency response, no negotiation, no delays. Within 72 hours, he had to be on a transport heading south. The decision to leave Seraphina with his sister-in-law Beatrice wasn't made lightly. Beatrice had always been attentive during family gatherings, bringing thoughtful gifts and showing genuine interest in Seraphina's activities. She was married to a stable man with a steady job, lived in a nice neighborhood, and had no children of her own, which she claimed made her eager to dote on her niece. "Don't worry about anything," Beatrice had assured him as they signed the temporary guardianship papers. Seraphina will be spoiled rotten by the time you get back. I've already planned ballet lessons and art classes. She'll have everything she needs and more." Her smile had seemed so genuine, her excitement so real. Cassius had felt a wave of relief that his daughter would be not just cared for, but cherished. Beatrice Hawthorne presented herself as the perfect temporary guardian. During the transition week before Cassius's departure, she arrived each morning with fresh groceries and afternoon activities planned. She helped Seraphina pack her favorite clothes and toys, promising to set up a special room just for her. She even brought photo albums to document their time together for when Daddy returned. Seraphina had warmed to Beatrice quickly. Her aunt seemed to understand her love for art, encouraging her to draw and paint without worrying about making messes. Beatrice praised her intelligence, complimented her creativity, and made grand promises about the adventures they would have together. To both father and daughter, she appeared to be exactly what they needed, a loving family member who would bridge the gap until they could be reunited. The night before his deployment, Cassius had watched Beatrice help Seraphina arrange her stuffed animals in their new temporary bedroom. The scene had filled him with peace. His daughter was giggling as Beatrice told her stories about the tea parties they would have and the movies they would watch. It seemed like the ideal arrangement, family caring for family with genuine love and excitement. The transformation began within days of Cassius's departure. Beatrice's warm smiles disappeared the moment no witnesses were present. The planned ballet lessons never materialized. The art supplies were locked away. Instead, Seraphina found herself subjected to increasingly bizarre and cruel rules that made no sense to her young mind. It started with restrictions on where she could sit. Children should not occupy adult furniture, Beatrice declared, removing cushions from chairs and designating only floor spaces as appropriate for Seraphina. Then came the walking restrictions. "You make too much noise stomping around like an elephant," Beatrice snapped one morning. "Proper young ladies move quietly and stay low to the ground." The punishments for standing upright began as brief timeouts, but quickly escalated. Standing was labeled as defiant behavior. Walking normally became showing off. Within 2 weeks, Seraphina learned that remaining on her hands and knees was the only way to avoid Beatrice's sudden rages and increasingly creative punishments. What followed was a methodical campaign to strip away Seraphina's humanity. Beatrice implemented a system of animal training that she claimed would teach the child proper humility. Meals were served in bowls placed on the floor. Seraphina was required to eat without using her hands, like an animal. Water was rationed and provided in a pet dish that she could only access while crawling. The psychological component was perhaps even more devastating than the physical degradation. Beatrice constantly reinforced that walking upright was a privilege that Seraphina had not earned. "Good girls stay close to the ground" became a daily mantra. Only important people get to stand tall, and you are not important. The repetition was relentless, designed to reprogram a child's understanding of her own worth. Seraphina's bedroom was relocated to a space under the stairs, a cramped area where standing was physically impossible. Her clothes were replaced with oversized shirts that dragged on the ground, further reinforcing her floor-bound existence. Beatrice documented none of this for Cassius, instead sending carefully staged photos that showed only Seraphina's face, smiling weakly at the camera while positioned to hide her true circumstances. The most insidious aspect was the gradual erosion of Seraphina's memory of normal life. Day by day, her recollection of running, jumping, and dancing grew fainter. Her leg muscles began to atrophy from disuse. The confident, joyful child who had once climbed trees and ran like the wind was being systematically transformed into something less than human. Martha Rodriguez lived in the house directly across from Beatrice's well-maintained suburban home. As a retired nurse, she had developed an instinct for detecting suffering, even when it was carefully hidden. She began noticing troubling patterns in the months following Seraphina's arrival. The child was never seen playing in the backyard, never appeared at the front windows, never emerged for the school bus that stopped right outside their door. When Martha did catch glimpses of Seraphina, the child appeared to be always at ground level, sitting, kneeling, or lying down. She assumed the girl might be ill, but Beatrice deflected any neighborly inquiries with explanations about Seraphina being a quiet, introspective child who prefers indoor activities. The responses were smooth and practiced, designed to discourage further questions. Mrs. Chen, Seraphina's former first-grade teacher, had also grown concerned. Beatrice had withdrawn Seraphina from school within a month of Cassius's deployment, claiming to be implementing a specialized home education program better suited to the child's unique needs. When Mrs. Chen attempted to conduct the required welfare check, Beatrice provided a flawless performance, a clean house, educational materials on display, and a silent Seraphina, who nodded appropriately but never spoke. The teacher left with an uneasy feeling she couldn't quite name. Something about the way Seraphina had remained seated throughout the entire visit, never once standing or even shifting her position, had struck her as unnatural. But with no concrete evidence of wrongdoing, and Beatrice's convincing explanations, her concerns were dismissed by the administration. From his base 300 miles away, Cassius began experiencing an inexplicable unease about his daughter's situation. Their scheduled phone calls had become increasingly strange. Seraphina's voice sounded different, smaller, more distant, filled with a caution that hadn't been there before. When he asked about her day, her responses were brief and oddly formal, as if she were reciting rehearsed lines. More troubling were Beatrice's excuses for why video calls weren't possible. "The internet connection is terrible," she would explain, or "Seraphina is feeling shy about her appearance today." Each deflection felt calculated, designed to prevent him from seeing his daughter's condition. His requests for recent photos were met with delays and eventually forgotten entirely. His fellow soldiers noticed the change in his demeanor. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, his closest friend on the base, observed that Cassius had stopped talking about his daughter's latest adventures. "You used to light up when you got those calls," Mike pointed out one evening. "Now you look like you're preparing for bad news." The observation hit home because it was true. Something was fundamentally wrong, and every paternal instinct he possessed was screaming warnings he couldn't ignore. The breaking point came during what would be their final phone call. When Cassius asked to speak with Seraphina, there was an unusual delay before she came to the phone. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, and she sounded afraid. "Hi, Daddy," she had said, the words coming out in a rush as if she were running out of time. "I'm being good. I stay quiet. I stay down." The line went dead before he could ask what she meant. That phrase haunted him. "I stay down." What did that mean? Why would she need to stay down? The questions consumed him until he made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. He submitted a hardship leave request, claiming a family emergency. When it was initially denied due to operational requirements, he made a choice that went against everything he had been trained to do. He went absent without official leave. "I have to go," he told Mike as he packed his gear in the middle of the night. "Something's wrong with my daughter. I can feel it in my bones." Mike didn't try to stop him. He had daughters of his own, and he understood that some battles are more important than military protocol. "Bring her home safe," was all he said as Cassius disappeared into the darkness. The moment Cassius rounded the corner into his own living room, time seemed to fragment into slow-motion horror. His daughter, his bright, energetic, dancing daughter, was moving across the floor on her hands and knees like a broken toy. Her movements were careful and practiced, suggesting this wasn't a game or a temporary position. This was how she lived now. Her knees were covered in thick calluses, evidence of months spent in this position. Her clothes were dirty and ill-fitting, hanging loose on a frame that had grown thin. But it was her eyes that destroyed him. Those same bright eyes that used to sparkle with mischief and joy were now dull and fearful, constantly scanning the room as if expecting punishment for some unknown transgression. When Seraphina noticed him standing there, she didn't jump up to run to him. She couldn't. Instead, she crawled toward him with heartbreaking eagerness, her small hands slapping against the hardwood with each movement. "Daddy," she whispered, reaching him and nuzzling against his legs while remaining on the floor. "You came back, but I can't get up," she said. "I'm not allowed." The words hit Cassius like physical blows. "Not allowed," he repeated, his voice cracking. He knelt down to her level, his hands shaking as he gently touched her face. "Baby, what do you mean you're not allowed to stand up?" The terror in her eyes as she glanced toward the kitchen told him everything he needed to know. Someone had done this to her. Someone had taken his dancing daughter and turned her into this frightened creature who could no longer remember how to stand. Seraphina, Beatrice's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face cycling through expressions: surprise at seeing Cassius, then quick calculation, then forced warmth. "Cassius, you're home early. What a wonderful surprise." But her eyes remained cold, watching Seraphina's every movement with predatory alertness. Cassius rose slowly, his military training helping him maintain composure, while his heart screamed for justice. "Beatrice," he said, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of barely controlled fury. "Why is my daughter crawling on the floor like an animal?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. "Oh, that," Beatrice laughed, the sound artificial and rehearsed. "She's been going through a phase. You know how children can be. She saw a nature documentary about wolves and decided she wanted to be like them. I've been trying to discourage it, but you know how stubborn she can be." The lie was smooth and practiced, delivered with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment. But Cassius was looking at his daughter, not listening to his sister-in-law. Seraphina's reaction to Beatrice's presence told him everything. The child had pressed herself lower to the ground, her body language screaming fear. This wasn't a phase or a game. This was learned behavior born from systematic conditioning and terror. "Stand up, baby," Cassius said softly to his daughter, extending his hands toward her. "Come to daddy." But Seraphina's eyes darted fearfully toward Beatrice, then back to her father. She shook her head slightly, terror written across her small features. "I can't," she whispered. "It hurts when I try." And she gets angry. The confession broke something fundamental inside Cassius. He turned to face Beatrice, and for the first time in his military career, he struggled to control his impulse toward violence. "What did you do to her?" His voice was quiet, but it carried the promise of retribution that made Beatrice step backward. "I taught her discipline," Beatrice replied, her mask finally slipping to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. "Children these days are too entitled, too demanding. She needed to learn her place in the world. I gave her structure, boundaries. You should be grateful." "Grateful," Cassius repeated, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. He knelt beside Seraphina again, his hands gentle as he examined her knees, the raw, calloused skin that spoke of months of forced crawling. "You destroyed my child's ability to walk, and you want me to be grateful." His daughter flinched at his raised voice, not because she feared him, but because she had been conditioned to fear any sign of conflict. Martha Rodriguez had been watching from her window across the street when she saw Cassius arrive. She had been waiting for this moment for months, praying that someone would finally see what she had only been able to glimpse in fragments. When the shouting started, she didn't hesitate. She called 911, then called Child Protective Services, then called every number she could think of. This was her chance to finally speak for the silent child she had been watching suffer from a distance. The investigation that followed revealed the systematic nature of Beatrice's abuse. Medical examinations showed severe muscle atrophy in Seraphina's legs from months of disuse. Child psychologists documented symptoms of severe conditioning trauma. Physical evidence included the modified living spaces designed to prevent standing, the animal feeding dishes, and most damning of all, Beatrice's own detailed journal documenting her training methods for creating what she called properly submissive children. Cassius faced military charges for going AWOL, but the discovery of his daughter's condition created a groundswell of public support. Veterans organizations rallied around him, providing legal assistance and media coverage. The story of the soldier father who defied military law to save his daughter struck a chord with parents across the nation. The legal battle was complex and lengthy. Beatrice's defense team argued that her methods were unorthodox but not criminal, claiming she was attempting to address behavioral issues through alternative discipline. They painted Cassius as an unstable veteran whose military service had compromised his judgment, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the medical testimony was unassailable. The story broke nationally when a video emerged of Seraphina's first physical therapy session. The footage showed a 7-year-old girl having to relearn how to stand, her legs shaking with the effort, her face a mixture of determination and fear. The image of her father supporting her trembling form while whispering encouragement became a symbol of both human cruelty and paternal love. Support poured in from unexpected places. Fellow military families shared their own stories of deployment anxiety and the trust placed in caregivers. Child advocacy groups used Seraphina's case to highlight gaps in oversight systems. Mental health professionals provided free services to help both father and daughter navigate their trauma. The local community that had remained silent during Seraphina's ordeal now faced their own reckoning. Martha Rodriguez became a vocal advocate for mandatory reporting training. Mrs. Chen pushed for enhanced welfare check protocols in schools. The collective guilt of those who had suspected but not acted became a powerful force for systemic change. Beatrice Hawthorne was ultimately sentenced to 8 years in prison for child abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and psychological torture. The trial revealed that Seraphina was not her first victim. 2 other children had endured similar treatment in previous years, but their cases had been buried through intimidation and legal maneuvering. During the sentencing hearing, Cassius read a victim impact statement that reduced the courtroom to silence. He spoke not of revenge, but of the months ahead that would be required to help his daughter remember how to be a child again. "You didn't just hurt her body," he said, looking directly at Beatrice. "You tried to steal her humanity. But children are stronger than you knew, and love is more powerful than fear." Seraphina, now able to stand with assistance, was present for the verdict reading. When the judge announced the guilty verdict on all counts, she didn't cheer or cry. She simply reached up and took her father's hand, while standing on her own 2 feet. Recovery wasn't instant or miraculous. Seraphina required months of physical therapy to rebuild the muscle strength needed for normal walking. The psychological healing took even longer. She had developed anxiety responses to everyday activities. Standing too quickly could trigger panic attacks, and sudden movements still made her drop to the floor instinctively. But progress came in small, precious moments. The first time she walked 5 steps without support. The day she asked if she could try climbing the oak tree again. The evening she danced, really danced, to music playing on the radio. Her movements tentative but free. Each milestone was a victory not just for Seraphina, but for the power of unconditional love to heal even the deepest wounds. Cassius learned patience he never knew he possessed. Some days were harder than others. There were setbacks and bad dreams and moments when his daughter would forget she was allowed to stand. But he never wavered in his commitment to helping her reclaim her rightful place in the world, upright, confident, and free. Today, Sergeant Kane is a thriving teenager who runs track at her high school and volunteers at a local organization that supports child abuse survivors. She speaks at conferences about resilience and the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Her story has inspired legislation, improving oversight of temporary guardianship arrangements for military families. Cassius remained in the Army, but his experience led him to become an advocate for military family support services. He helps other service members navigate the challenges of deployment while ensuring their children's safety. His message is simple but powerful. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never stop fighting for your child, no matter what the cost. The blue door of their home still bears Seraphina's tiny handprints from when she was 3 years old. But now there are new prints beside them. Larger ones from when she was learning to stand again, and the most recent ones from last week when she painted them together as a reminder that some things are worth preserving and some things are worth changing. Their story reminds us that evil often wears a familiar face and speaks in soothing tones. But it also reminds us that love, true, fierce, unconditional love, can triumph over even the most systematic cruelty. Sometimes saving someone requires destroying everything you thought you knew about the world. And sometimes, the greatest victory is simply hearing your child laugh while standing on their own 2 feet. The sound of small feet running across hardwood floors is now the most beautiful music in the world to Cassius Kane. And every morning, when Seraphina comes downstairs for breakfast, walking tall and confident, both father and daughter are reminded that some battles are worth fighting, no matter the personal cost.